So this past Monday night, Kelly and I got to have dinner by ourselves. Since we can't go out to eat right now, that meant our kids ate dinner at our kitchen table, and we got to eat dinner at our dining room table. That's what date night has become this year. But we just started talking for about an hour with a little bit of privacy for at least that long. And Kelly and I, we don't remember when we met. And that's not because it wasn't a big deal or because we didn't care. It's because we met when we were probably 5 or 6 years old. That's why we don't remember. We've known each other most of our lives, which means we've already got a ton of memories. Really cool. One of those memories was prom. We actually got to go to prom together. And by looking at that picture, I think we were about 12 years old when we went. Unfortunately, we went just as friends. Like, I wanted to go as much more than friends, but that's a longer story for another time. And so we just sat around on Monday night talking about the memories we had from prom. Like, we said, hey, remember the venue that we went to? Man, that place was pretty sweet. That was a nice place, especially for us in high school. Or do you remember me picking you up in my dad's sweet 1993 gold Toyota Camry? That car was cherry. It was so pretty. And I told her, I remember being nervous the whole night around her. I was nervous the entire night around her, but I was really excited to show her off as my date. And she said she remembered that she really liked it when I grabbed her hand for the first time and led her through the crowd. That should get an awe. That's romantic, right? Thank you. You guys were on cue. Good job. And then I also said, hey, remember when I was a ridiculously good dancer out on the floor? And she said, no. No, I don't remember that. So we switched topics and we talked about our first date. We spent some time talking about that. Our official first date, we were in college and we were both home from school. It was the middle of July. And at that time, I had this old beat up Subaru. Like, it was just this little box of a car, had no air conditioning, no tape player, no radio. It had rusted out floors and it had this really jacked up muffler. So even though it was this small car, it sounded like a NASCAR. So, like, I announced my arrival anywhere I went when I was like a mile away still. This thing was loud. So I go and pick her up in this car, and we head downtown Indianapolis, and I'd reserved some paddle boats for us to take down the canal that goes right through the middle of the city. Another romantic thing, say, aw. There we go. Okay, you were better the first time. You were. So we're driving downtown, and my glorious car decides it wants to break down. Not only break down, oh, thank you. You guys got it. It broke down in the middle of a very busy street that had no shoulder. So I have to get out and start pushing this thing. I push it more than a half a mile. Kelly is steering it. It's in the middle of July in Indiana. And if you've never experienced that, hello, humidity. So now I am just dripping in sweat. The date hasn't even started. Not off to a good start. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. We can look back on it now and it's funny, but then in the moment, not so much. So we just spent all night, our hour alone at our dining room table, just remembering, because there's power in remembering, right? I mean, we love to take pictures and look back through pictures. It just sparks memories. It's fun to go through your Instagram feed and look at all the pictures that you posted, because there's a memory attached to each one of them. I will print out physical copies of pictures and I put them in the pages of my journal. So when I'm flipping back through it and reading back through it, I've got a picture to go with that entry. Just another way for me to remember, because we love to do that. I mean, we love pictures. We love to tell stories, maybe the same story over and over again, because there's power in remembering. Like, remembering even brings up different kinds of emotions, doesn't it? Like, if you remember about your car breaking down on your first date with your future wife, now you can laugh about it. It brings up laughter. Or maybe remembering brings up sadness too, when you remember your wife's sister that passed away. Or remembering can ingrain lessons that you've learned in the past. Oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, this is what I learned from that. Remembering can strengthen a relationship too. Like, when you think about all the different things that you've gone through together, that can really strengthen a relationship. Remembering can even help you from making the same mistake twice, right? Oh, I don't want to do that again. Experience isn't the only teacher, but it is the only school a fool attends twice. Remembering helps you avoid that. There's power in it. And sometimes the way forward is actually to look back. I mean, why do we look back on the Christmas story? Now, I'm guessing that all of us know this story, or at least we know parts of the Christmas story. You got Mary and Joseph, you got baby Jesus, a manger, 3 wise men, a bright star, no room at the inn, a bunch of shepherds. Okay, yeah, we got it. We know the story. So, why do we keep going back to this every December? Because is this what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to talk about this story at Christmas time. Is that why? No. The reason we keep going back to this story, maybe it's a story that we've heard 100 times before. The reason we go back to it at least once a year, is to remember. Not just remember the story and the fun facts about it, but to remember the point of the story. To remember the hope that comes out of the story. And to remember that we can actually live out parts of this story. You and I, we are not just spectators to the first Christmas story. There's parts of the story that we can actually live out. Here's what I mean. Look at this story from Mary's perspective. This is Luke chapter 1. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, Elizabeth was Mary's cousin, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a village in Galilee, to a virgin named Mary. She was engaged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of King David. Gabriel appeared to her and said, "Greetings, favored woman, the Lord is with you." Confused and disturbed, Mary tried to think about what the angel could mean. "Don't be afraid, Mary," the angel told her, "for you have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus. He will be very great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord will give him the throne of his ancestor David, and he will reign over Israel forever. His kingdom will never end." So Mary asked the angel, "How can this happen? I'm a virgin." It's a fair question for her to ask. The angel replied, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the baby to be born will be holy, and he will be called the Son of God." Verse 37, "For nothing is impossible with God." That's awesome right there. Memorize that verse. For nothing is impossible with God, especially as we head into 2021. But Mary asks a question here. It's subtle. She asks a question that you and I, we ask all the time. All the time. How? How is this going to happen? How is this a good thing? Maybe Mary's not just referring to the biological aspect of her situation, even though that's understandable in her situation. She's also asking about her context. How? What she's going to go through. How? Because this news that she gets right here, this isn't just rainbows and butterflies for her. No, is she going to lose her fiance as soon as he finds out that she's pregnant? That's almost a guarantee. Is she going to get kicked out of her parents' house because she's pregnant and not married, and then be forced to go into begging or prostitution just to survive? That's a very likely possibility. Is she going to get drug out in the street and stoned to death? Well, the law permitted that at that time for what looks like adultery in her case. So, Gabriel, how is this good news? You're telling me that I have found favor with God, that he's with me, but this doesn't seem like good news because I don't know how this is going to happen. And even if this does happen, this son that you're telling me is going to be born, and I'm going to name him Jesus, well, how is he going to be very great if he's born to an unwed teenage girl? That's unheard of, Gabriel. That's scandalous. And there's more to it. Let's just say that Mary makes it through these cultural consequences for being pregnant and out of wedlock. Let's just say she gets through these. Think about what this is going to mean for Mary to be the mother of Jesus, to raise the Son of God. You're going to raise the Son of God. Don't screw that one up. Moms, can you relate with that, the feeling of, man, I feel like I'm screwing my kids up. Or I don't want to do this wrong. I want to make sure that they're taken care of. I want them to grow. What if I mess this up, right? I think every mom goes through that at some point. Think about it for Mary. She's got the Son of God. That's going to present some unique challenges. Let's just take going to the pool, for example. How many of you think it's a challenge to get a 4-year-old to put sunscreen on, right? That is an argument every time. Well, what about when that 4-year-old is actually the one that created the sun? Try to get sunscreen on him. Or this, hey, Jesus, make sure you put your floaties on before you get into the pool because I don't care that you can walk on water. If you don't put your floaties on, then none of the other kids are going to want to put theirs on. It's going to be a battle. Just please put them on. I'm sure it wasn't like that, but I just want to think it was. But there were unique challenges. Like, think about this for Mary. She's going to think he's crazy at one point. She's told that he's going to be very great. She doesn't know how. She's told he's going to be very great. But at one point during Jesus' ministry, Mary and all of Jesus' brothers and sisters, they go to him to get him because they think he's lost his mind. Jesus, you're saying some crazy things. We need to get you home. She would have heard people call him names and gossip about him. If you're a parent, how does that feel when you hear that said about your kid? She was going to hear the lies told about Jesus. People are going to laugh at him and accuse him. And her son's actually perfect. Like, I know there's plenty of parents that think their kids are perfect, but we all know they're just a little delusional. Mary's son actually is perfect. He's being lied about. He's being gossiped about. He's being called names, and she's going to have to watch people reject him. That hurts too as a parent. Worst of all, she's going to have to see all the torture he goes through when he's crucified. Like, can you imagine seeing your son go through that? So with all that in mind, I think we can kind of give her a little bit of grace and understand when she asks, how? Like, how is this going to happen? How am I going to make it through this? What's going to happen to me? She's got to think about the how this is going to happen for Jesus and what's going to happen for her. This is why we need to memorize the angel's response right here. For nothing is impossible with God, because we find ourselves in very similar situations. Maybe not raising Jesus, but there are situations and seasons in life where you just feel like you're hitting obstacle after obstacle. It's like setback after setback, and you just feel like you're stuck asking, how? Like, how am I going to make it through this season financially? How is my marriage going to make it through this? How am I going to get the help my kid needs? You're just stuck asking how. There's nothing impossible with God. Great, I get it, but here's the key. Here's the key. You don't have to know the how. You just have to trust the who. You don't have to know the how. You just have to be able to trust the who. Proverbs 19:21 says, the Lord's purpose will prevail. Will. Not maybe. Not if circumstances are right. Not if the market turns around. Not if the government and politicians start pushing or stop pushing against the church. No, God's purposes will prevail. They will. God's purposes will prevail. He is working them out. If they didn't, if what his purposes are, if they didn't work out, if they were up in the air, if they were contingent on other circumstances, then he wouldn't be God. But they do work out. You can ask how. How is an okay question to ask. We can ask how all day long. Sometimes you're going to get the answer to how, sometimes you're not. But what's most important is that you know the who, the one who is working out the how. Nothing is impossible with God. His purpose will prevail. Mary knew that. So she's wrestling with this. She's wondering, okay, how's this going to work out? How is Jesus going to come out? What am I going to go through? How am I going to make it through all this stuff that I'm going to have to deal with? How am I going to make it through seeing what Jesus is going to go through? And then the angel says something to her. He starts talking about what's happening to Elizabeth, her cousin, God doing some crazy things with her. And all of a sudden that sparks something for Mary. She stops with the how in her head because it brought up a memory. And then all of a sudden she responds to everything that she just was told. She responds to everything that's going to happen to her, even though she doesn't know how it's all going to work out. And she says this in Luke 1:38. She says, I'm the Lord's servant. Everything that you just said about me, let it be true. I want to respond like Mary. This is what makes her great. Mary's great not because she gave birth to Jesus. That's not what makes her great. Mary's not great because she was the mother of Jesus while he was on earth. That's not what makes her great. She did a great job, but that's not what made her great. What made her great is her response right here. That's what made her great. And we all want to be great too. And nobody wakes up one day and says, you know what? Yeah, I want to live a mediocre life. Nobody says that. No, we all want to have a great life. We all want to be a part of great things. We want to do great things, and our world offers all kinds of definitions for what great is. Usually greatness is defined by performance, recognition, success, right? Those things are great, but that's not the definition of it. Peyton Manning is the greatest quarterback of all time. Don't give me the Tom Brady stuff. He might be the most accomplished. Peyton is the greatest. Why? Success, accomplishments, accolades, talents. And with all those things comes status. Those are great things. There's nothing wrong with them, but that's not what makes someone great. What makes someone great is what Mary just did right here. Here's what it is. Greatness is trusting God with the impossible and then obeying him without hesitation. That's what's great. That's what's great. That's exactly what Mary just did. She trusted God with the impossible. You're telling me I'm going to give birth to the Son of God and I'm going to become pregnant, but I'm going to be a virgin. Scientifically, that's impossible, God. And you're telling me I got to raise the Son of God? That also feels like it's impossible. But I trust you with it. Let's go. Trusted with the impossible and obeyed him without hesitation. That's what made her great. And that's what a Lord's servant is. When she defined herself as the Lord's servant, that's the definition of greatness. Greatness is not defined by status, it's defined by service. Unmarried, pregnant teenage girl would have been about as low on the status list as you could possibly find in that culture. Nowhere near Peyton Manning status. But because she described herself as a servant and because she acted like one, Jesus says in Matthew 20:26, he says, whoever would be great among you must be your servant. So servant, that's what's great. In our world, it's the opposite. Greatness is defined by service, not status. Okay, I get how this is going to happen. It's going to happen because of the power of God. I get it. Nothing's impossible with God. I understand that Mary was great because she trusted God with the impossible and she was a servant. Gotcha. But I still have one how question. Here's my other how question. How was she able to respond like that? In the moment, how was she able to respond like that? Trust God with the impossible? And she has no idea how it's going to work out. She's following his lead, even though she doesn't know any of the details, any of the playbook, how it's going to work out. There's so much uncertainty with this for Mary. And there's a potential for some serious personal loss. And Mary's got a lot on the line right here. A lot on the line. And yet she's able to respond so calm, cool, and collected. How? I mean, Elizabeth even says, her cousin even says, hey, Mary, you're blessed because you believe the Lord's going to do what he says he's going to do. How does she believe that God's going to do what he says he's going to do? Here's how. Here's how. It's subtle, but this is what we can't miss. Mary knew that God was faithful in the past, so she knew that he'd be faithful in the present. She knew what God had done for her in the past, how he'd been faithful to her personally, and how he'd been faithful to God's people, Israel. Today, that would be the church. She knew he was faithful in the past, so she knew he's going to be faithful in the future and right now. She remembered. That's how she was able to respond like that. There's power in remembering. I remember when I was 4 years old, I fell off a playground headfirst, snapped my collarbone, and I can still remember seeing my dad come running to me to pick me up. Because I remembered him doing that, I trusted and knew that if that happened again in the future, my dad was going to come pick me up and help me. It just strengthened my trust in him by remembering that. I remember Kelly taking care of me after I got all banged up from a surgery. I remember how she took care of me, knowing that in the future when that happens, she's going to take care of me again. It just created more of a bond between us just by remembering what she did. I had a couple of close friends that stuck with me through a season where I experienced some serious loss and some serious betrayal. And they stuck by me walking through all that junk that was so painful to me, which made me know that if that happens in the future, when I go through it again in the future, they're going to stick right by my side. It just put more value on that friendship because I remembered what they did. There's power in remembering. Mary remembered what he'd done in the past, so she knew that God was going to be faithful again in the future. So she sings about it. That's her response. In the story, a musical breaks out. Listen to her song. And this is not, it's not a song about what God's going to do. She talks about what God has already done. She says this, "Oh, how my soul praises the Lord, how my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For he took notice of this lowly servant girl, and from now on, all generations will call me blessed. For the mighty one, the Holy One, in all he has done great things for me. He shows mercy from generation to all who fear him. His mighty arm has done," that's another way for saying God's power. "His mighty arm has done tremendous things. He has scattered the proud and the haughty ones. He has brought down princes from their thrones, and he's exalted the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, and he sent the rich away with empty hands. He has helped his servant Israel and remembered to be merciful, for he made this promise to our ancestors, to Abraham and his children forever. Since I know that he has, I know that he will." That's her song summed up in one word. Since I know that he has, I know that he will. The way Mary was able to trust God with the impossible and obey him without hesitation was by remembering. There's serious power in remembering. Remember who God is. Remember what he has done. We're rounding the corner for another year, and there are so many unknowns. How's COVID going to get resolved? I don't know, but everybody's got an opinion. How am I going to make it through financially? How's my job going to stay safe in this season? Kelly met somebody this week just out and about, didn't know him, doesn't go to our church, at least we don't think he does. And he said to her, "Hey, your husband's a pastor, right?" And she said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, if you don't mind," and then big tears welled up in his eyes and his lips started quivering and he paused and his voice got real weak when he started talking again. "If you don't mind, if you guys would pray for my job, because I don't know how it's going to work out. I don't know how. I don't know how this is going to affect our kids long term. How do we take care of them long term? I don't know how the political divide is going to get bridged. I don't know in this next year how I'm not going to lose my mind." When you don't know how, remember that he already has. That's Mary's application for you and I right now. 1 Chronicles 16:12 says, "Remember the wondrous works God has done, because it is so much easier to trust him and how he's going to work things out, how his purpose will prevail, how he will take care of you. It is so much easier to trust God with the how when you know what he already has done." So if you hear one thing today, if this is the only thing you hear today, hear me on this. Remember what God has done as you wait for what he will do. Because that's where we're all at right now. This year has forced us all into a waiting period. We're waiting right now. We don't like that. We're not good. I hate waiting. I hate it. We're not good at waiting, but we've been forced into that spot right now. Remember what God has done while you wait for what he will do. Write that down, write it where you're going to see it, share it with somebody else, because every single one of us needs to hear that right now. Remember what God has done as you wait for what he will do. What has God done for you? I remember what he's done for me. Right after Kelly and I got married, first jobs out of college, we're making nothing, no money at all. We both have, within a 3-month period, we both have 2 different surgeries. There's just this theme of injury that goes through my life. We both have surgery, and of course, a month later, we get the medical bills on the same week. Of course, we get them the same week. And after insurance, and we still owe a certain amount, and I'm looking at what we got to pay, and between what we have in savings and what we make in our jobs, this is mathematically impossible for us to pay this. It's just not going to work out. So we're trying to figure out, how is this going to work? How are we going to pay for this? How are we going to be okay? And we had a conversation one night. Kelly and I, from the get-go, we've given back to what the church, what Bible talks about tithing. We give 10% at least to the church every week, and we've done that from the get-go. So we started talking about, do we stop tithing for a little while? Because even if we stop doing that, we're still not going to be able to pay for everything that's on this bill. Do we stop doing that for a little while? Malachi 3 came up into my head. It's the same situation, and God says to the people of Israel, he said, hey, test me with your giving. Bring the full tithe and see what I will do, because you can't outgive me. So that came into my mind. So we decided, okay, we're going to keep tithing. God's going to take care of this. We're going to figure this out. A week later, we get a bonus from work. Have no idea what it was for. It was out of the blue. It wasn't planned at all. We literally don't know what this came from. We get a bonus from work. We give 10% of that to the church, and what's left after we tithe that 10%, what's left covers both medical bills with an excess of 7 cents. So from that moment on, like right now, when there's, the economy's hurt, what happened in 2008, I'm not worried financially. I've seen what God's done. I can remember how he took care of it when it was mathematically impossible. And I took accounting in college, and this doesn't work out. So I'm not worried about it. I trust him because I remember what he did. I remember what God did when we almost lost our oldest son when he was being born. We're at the hospital, and all of a sudden, doctors and nurses come running into Kelly's room, and they're yanking cords out of her bed, not saying a word. Kelly's face is white. They start pushing her bed out of the room and start sprinting with her in a hospital bed down a hallway to an OR, not telling me what's going on. I'm running behind them, trying to figure it out. Finally, 2 nurses grab me and stop me, and I'm like, what is going on here? And you can tell they don't want to tell me. Just shoot me straight. What's going on right now? And they said, we lost your son's heartbeat. We might lose him. Scariest moment of my life so far. And they keep talking to me about different things. They're putting gowns on me. I don't even know what's happening. I don't know what they're saying, but I do remember in the middle of that hallway yelling out to God, God, you got to do something. You got to do something right now. Like, I know that you have power over life and death. I know that it's a snap of the finger for you to save my son right now. Do it. And then something else came back into my head. So I remembered something else. Daniel chapter 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're told that they've got to bow down and worship this stupid false idol that Nebuchadnezzar built in the middle of Babylon. They say, you got to worship this. You got to deny your God, worship this. If you don't, we're going to throw you in that fiery furnace over there, and you're going to burn alive. And these 3 guys, they look at the altar, they look at this furnace, and they say, our God can save us. But even if he doesn't, we will still worship him. So I got those 2 things in my mind. I know that God can save my son right now, but I also have a decision to make. You know what? Even if you don't save Sawyer, I'll still worship you, God. You're in control. I know that you got this. And he did. Many of you have met my oldest son. He saved Sawyer completely fine and healthy. Kelly was fine. But I can remember that. The scariest moment of my life so far, and know that God's in control even if I can't see how it's going to work out. So I'll still worship him. What's he done for you? What's he done for you? And maybe you're saying, God's done nothing for me. Matt, this has happened in my life. This has happened. I'm going through this right now. God's done nothing for me. I don't know your circumstances. I get it. I'm not pushing back on that, but I will say this. The fact that you're here right now or you're connecting with us online and you're hearing this means God is doing something right now. He's wooing you and you don't even know it. Not yet. And the closer you step forward to God, the more you seek him out, the more he will open your eyes to let you see things from behind you. And remember, actually, he was working. I remember that now. What's he done for you? Spend time every single day remembering it. Write it down. Talk about it in your group. Not just so that you get to remember it, but other people can hear stories. After the first service, I had a couple of people come up and grab me and say, here's what God has done. Man, that was awesome for me to hear that. I can remember that now too. Talk about it with other people. This is one of the endless reasons why we gather every single weekend is so that we can remember together. The reason we stand up here and sing songs is not just to make everyone feel good. It's not to have a cool experience. The reason we're up here singing and worshiping is so that we remember. Listen to so many of the songs that we sing. The lyrics talk about what God has done. It's because there's power in remembering. You know your hope isn't baseless. It will increase your faith. It will give you encouragement and peace as you walk into something that you don't know how it's going to work out. What's God done for you? And if you don't know what he's done, start here. This is God's word. It is truth. This is full of things that he has done. This is fuel for remembering right here. Here's the next step that I'm going to ask our entire church to take starting on January 1st. I want us as a church to do a daily Bible reading plan for the entire year together. Not just so that we can say we read the Bible every day. No, forget that. I want you to do it individually first because it's powerful. Not so you check a box, but so that you develop that discipline to be in God's word. That discipline will turn into delight. You will become more like Jesus. You will grow. You will have more things to remember. Verses from Malachi and Daniel and 1 Chronicles will pop up in your head when you need them. That's the only reason they came up into my mind is because I've read them before. God will bring them back. He'll let you remember those. It strengthens your faith. It'll be powerful for you. And I want to see what will happen if our entire church is doing it. What if we're reading the same thing in the Bible every day as a church? How powerful will that be? We got a plan already developed. You're going to see more about it this week and next week. You can download it on your device and just read it on your device every day. It pops up, shows you what you need to read for the day. Or if you're like me, you want to go old school and do it with the physical Bible, absolutely, we're going to do that. You can't trust how God is going to take care of something if you don't remember. And you can't remember if you don't know what he's done. It starts right here with what he's done. There's power in remembering his word. Christmas is an invitation to remember what God has done as we wait for what he will do. Christmas is not about the nostalgia. It's not. I know we got cool traditions, right? I mean, I'm watching Christmas movies this afternoon. There's things that we do as families, as a church. Traditions are fun at Christmas. But Christmas is not about the nostalgia. Christmas is actually about the future. The first Christmas story is a way for us to go forward as we look back. We look at the first Christmas story and we realize our hope isn't blind. Mary had hope. She didn't know how it was going to work out, and it worked out for Mary. Everything that God said was going to happen did. His purpose prevailed. That gives us a foundation for right now. Man, remember that Jesus, the Son of God, came to this world for you. We don't have to go up to God. He already came down to us. Remember that he suffered in every single way that we possibly could so that he can relate to you. Remember that God has made good on all of his promises. So when we walk into another year of uncertainty and tension and fear, remember what God has done as you wait for what he will do. That's what Christmas gives us. Remember, there's power in it. One of the things that Jesus gave us to remember and to increase our faith is something we do every single week here called communion. The reason we do this every single week is we take this little cracker or piece of bread, we take juice. The cracker, the bread represents Jesus' broken body. And the juice represents his blood that was all spilled and broken on the cross. Every single week we need to remember that, because that's why he came. And that's what our hope is in going forward. So right now, we're just going to take some time to take communion. If you grabbed one of the cups when you came in here, or if you're at home, you can grab some crackers or bread, some juice. Take some time right now just to remember what Jesus has done, to remember that he came, and he came for you. And if you're new to this, if you're not ready for communion, if you're not ready to follow Jesus, it's cool. Don't worry about right now. Just focus on the words of this song that we're going to sing. And then in a minute, we're all going to get up and worship. Hey, let's remember right now through communion.